Hello, everyone. Sam here, and I would like to introduce you to the first episode of the KI-GOR Chronicles. This has been a concept I've kind of been bouncing around ever since I started this booktube, and I kind of wanted to really jump into it now for a variety of reasons that I'll bring up here in a few minutes. But I'm going to call it episode 0, because this is meant to be an introduction to KI-GOR and sort of explaining my goals with this review project and basically explaining what I'm doing reading all these KI-GOR stories. So, for those that don't know, KI-GOR is a jungle hero. He was the main character that was used for Jungle Stories, which was a pulp magazine done by the pulp publisher Fiction House. In fact, I actually have in my collection one of the original Jungle Stories issues. This one was fall, which year was it? Fall 1946. And this one features the KI-GOR story Safari for Black Ivory. So, Jungle Stories was the main appearance of KI-GOR. And for those that couldn't tell by the fact that he's a big guy going around in a loincloth, KI-GOR was a Tarzan knockoff. But despite the fact that he was a knockoff, he was actually not the only one. In fact, Tarzan knockoffs were quite numerous in the pulp era. Because if you've seen my Tarzan of the Apes review, you'll know that the first Tarzan story appeared in a pulp magazine, and several of them that did afterwards. And because of that, there were a lot of competitors to Tarzan, because Tarzan was so insanely popular, even before a lot of the films were coming out. And because of that, whenever something's popular, some other company is always looking to find a way to profit off it with an idea that is just similar enough to attract the same audience, but not liable enough for copyright infringement. And this happened all the time in the time of the pulp magazines. Because, after all, you have The Shadow, who was insanely popular, and there were a lot of characters who came fairly soon after he premiered that were pretty close to what the Shadow was like the Spider, the Black Bat. Now, some of those characters did have enough of a difference in personality that a lot of people don't like calling them knockoffs. And I think that's true and viable, but you would be absolutely lying your head off if you were sitting there going, well, the Spider was totally not made because they wanted a Shadow-esque character. It's like, no, they were looking for a Shadow-esque character, but there was enough writers, particularly Norvell Page, worked on him to make him not as blatant a copy as he could have been. And Tarzan was not immune to this concept of a knockoff. And it happened throughout the 1910s and 1920s. But Tarzan knockoffs really came into overdrive around 1932. Because that was the year the first Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan film premiered. And for those that don't know, the 1930s and 40s Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies were absolutely huge. In fact, to a certain degree, they've kind of shaped how a lot of people viewed the Tarzan character. for better or for worse. So those Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films, absolutely huge. They're monster hits at the box office, and that becomes the signal for everybody who has a Tarzan-esque predilection. We need to make our own Tarzan. And so there were a lot of Tarzan knockoffs that start coming off not too long after that. And while this is happening, KI-GOR kind of comes in this wave of Tarzans who are not Tarzan. Different enough that they don't have to pay Edgar Rice Burroughs, but similar enough that you absolutely know who they are inspired by. But Fiction House decides, okay, starting in 1938, they decide we're going to have our own KI-GOR character, who's going to be our sort of Tarzan-esque character. And they do. They create Jungle Stories, which will feature KI-GOR as their cover character. I think for virtually all of these Jungle Stories issues, KI-GOR was generally the one on the cover. I think there was only a handful of times he wasn't the cover character. And so they premiere him, and KI-GOR is actually very successful by pulp standards. He doesn't get movies or anything, but for a pulp magazine that was only a quarterly, not a monthly, like a lot of other pulp magazines, it does pretty well. Fiction House runs the series for several dozen issues from 1938 to 1954. And the series only really stops when Fiction House themselves go under. So it was successful enough that Fiction House kept KI-GOR around for, let's see, 16 years. And if they hadn't gone under, who knows how much longer he would have been around. So he's a very interesting character in that respect, because he shows that period of time when Tarzan knockoffs were just big business. You could become very successful at it, and but KI-GOR is kind of the outlier in that he was successful, because a lot of the Tarzan knockoffs actually didn't go as long as you think they would. Probably because a lot of people sort of recognize, oh yeah, this is just Tarzan, but he's not Tarzan. And again, it's not like there was only a couple of Johnny Weissmuller films. He made a fair number of those, so it wasn't like people were starved for Tarzan, the character. This was more for people who... KI-GOR was kind of more for people who liked the vibe of Tarzan and sort of wanted a character like that who was similar enough that they could get a Tarzan-esque kick, but not necessarily have to wait for a new story by Edgar Rice Burroughs or a new Weissmuller movie. So KI-GOR is kind of that strange character who existed because there were enough writers who could whip up a Tarzan-esque story within 3 months and get it in the magazines. So it's very interesting. He's very interesting in that respect, of that kind of period where Tarzan mania was high enough that even a knockoff could be successful with the right presentation. But who is KI-GOR, the character? Well, KI-GOR is the son of a British missionary. And this missionary goes to Africa and he's there to do missionary work. He's trying to spread the word to the natives. And this is sometime in the 1910s. But the very late 1910s. Like, it's implied to be like sometime around the end of World War One, either right at the end of World War One or maybe a little beyond it. And this missionary's name is Kilgore, and Kilgore is his surname. I forgot what his first name was, but that was his last name. And he's there with his son. And, things are happy between the missionary and all these other natives. But one day, the father makes some of the natives irate, and he gets killed. And so little Kilgore, who's around 7 or 8 years old at this point, gets captured by the natives and sold into slavery. However, he's able to escape not long after, and he learns how to live in the jungle by himself with, great difficulty, but he essentially raises himself in the jungle. But so he's living out this existence, and it's around 20 years later, so he's in his late 20s. He's having this, relatively peaceful jungle existence. He avoids the natives, but, overall it's fine as far as relaxing as living in a jungle could be. But one day this plane crashes right into Kilgore's jungle. And it turns out this plane has this woman in it named Helene Vaughn. And Helene Vaughn is this aviatrix who is the daughter of this rich steel magnate. And she's adventurous, but she's kind of spoiled. She, when she first comes across Kilgore, she essentially tries to pay him and boss him around, which does not do much, considering they're right in the middle of the jungle, and Kilgore doesn't really have any understanding of currency. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention is Kilgore is called Kilgore because his last name was Kilgore, and as he got older, and because he didn't really hear English again, or hear him, or really understand what a surname was, it's eventually he kind of shortened it to Kilgore. Instead of Kilgore, it's Kilgore. So that's where his name comes from. But anyway, Kilgore finds Helene, and eventually they're able to understand each other, and they start making their way back to civilization. And as this journey happens, it happens over several stories. Kilgore and Helene start falling in love with each other. And they make... there's that typical, again, kind of taking from the Tarzan stories, that sort of tense dynamic of whether to stay in the jungle or go to civilization. And it's actually both characters who have that sort of character tension at different parts in their journey. But they start making their way back to civilization. And after a couple of these adventures where they're trying to get back to civilization, essentially Helene decides she's going to stay in the jungle with Kilgore, because she goes through this significant character development through the story and sort of realizes the riches and all the fancy flying and all the machines, they don't really mean anything without Kilgore, who she's fallen for. And so Helene decides to stay in the jungle with Kilgore, and most of the series is Kilgore and Helene's adventures in the jungle after they've been married. So that is essentially the setup. And Kagor and Helene are basically two peas in a pod. They're very much together with one another, and the stories often revolve around both of them. But you also have in this Kagor as two major supporting characters who are both of his friends. One is this guy named Timbu George. And Timbu George is actually an American, but he's an African American who was originally from Cincinnati. But he got on a ship to Africa at one point, and then right when he was supposed to get back on the ship, decides, you know what, I'm going to stay here and strike it out, see if I can make something of myself here. Because in Cincinnati, he was just like a railroad porter, not a very significant position. And so he strikes out in Africa to make it on his own, and he actually does make it. He becomes the chief of a tribe, and he becomes friends with Kagor over the course of the stories. And there's also Nagiso, and Nagiso is a pygmy. He's the pygmy. He's a chief of this pygmy tribe of small pygmy people, and he becomes friends with Kagor after a certain period of time. And again, kind of like how Tarzan has Tantor, Kagor also has an elephant. Named Marmo. And Marmo was an elephant that was from like some circus. He'd been captured and taken to a circus, and he escaped, and Kagor befriended him, and so Marmo always kind of hangs around Kagor to help him out whenever Kagor needs that strength of an elephant. So that's the essential plot and character setup for the Kagor stories. Now you might be going, well, Sam, you've certainly talked about Kagor, but why are you all that interested in him if he's just a Tarzan knockoff? Well, my interest kind of started actually before I was reading Tarzan. I actually read, this is the collection of stories that Steger Books has done, and I actually read this before I read any of the Tarzan stories. And the main reason was that about, I would say 2 years ago, I started becoming interested in Kagor as I started getting deeper into the pulp fandom. And one of the things that really interested me was the fact that nobody seemed to know much about him. Like even hardcore pulp fiction fans, if you ask around about Kagor, you get like generalizations. Like a lot of people say, oh yeah, they know generally about him, but in terms of the character dynamics, the storylines, not many people seem to know much about him. It was kind of a similar scenario to there was another pulp character. Who was it? Their name is on the tip of my tongue. I'll come back to them. But there's always sort of been pulp characters who are known by pulp fans, but in terms of the nitty-gritty details, not many people seem to know about them. So I kind of became curious. Also, the thing that kind of made me interested is the fact that there were a lot of Kagor stories from the original pulp magazine, but but in terms of like new stories done with Kagor, there actually was not all that many. There was like one or two I could find in pulp, like some old pulp fanzines. Airship 27 did a couple of new stories with him. There was one put out by Wildcat Books, who was this sort of new pulp publisher. But in the grand scheme of things, not all that many new KI-GOR stories had been done, which I found kind of interesting. Uh, that he had this kind of character, but nobody seems to do a whole lot with him. And one of the things is that KI-GOR is public domain, because a lot of fiction houses characters both in pulp magazines and comic books, because Fiction House did both, a lot of them are actually in the public domain because when Fiction House went under, they didn't really sell any of their assets, so nobody re-notified or updated the copyrights, which is interesting. And the one character who that the exception is Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, because Sheena had the television show in the early 50s, and because of that, even though Sheena is theoretically in the public domain, good luck trying to use her, because there's issues with like the groups that own the television rights, and so it's just a thing. Nobody really does Sheena stories anymore. But KI-GOR is in the public domain, and I was I'm always curious about characters like that who are in the public domain but aren't really used much. I always find that kind of interesting. Partially because as a writer, I wonder, well, can I do a story with any of these characters? So that was one of the main things that drew KI-GOR to me. I also had read the first volume of his stories. This is the complete series, volume 1, by it says Altus Press, but it's Steger Books nowadays, and they have 5 of these complete story collections. Sadly, they're kind of sluggish in releasing them. Like, this one was originally released in I think this was like 2009. Yeah, this one says 2009, and they released the fifth volume back in like 2024, like almost the 15 years after this one was done. So Steger Books has been kind of sluggish in releasing it. It's now gotten to the point that they're not even halfway through the original 58 or so stories of this series, and it's taken them longer to put out a quarter of the stories than it did for Jungle Stories to release the whole series. So I kind of wish they were a little more proactive with this. But I read this edition, and it was actually more entertaining than I thought it would be, because there are, if I remember correctly, 6 stories in here, and there's actually a lot of interesting creative choices in these stories. So I was kind of like, okay, for a Tarzan knockoff, this is actually kind of interesting. And I decided, okay, I'm really liking where this is going. And the other element I really liked about the stories was Helene Vaughn, who becomes KI-GOR's wife, because she actually has a very interesting character development throughout the first couple of stories. You know, going from this spoiled, rich aviatrix to like being willing to throw that all away for KI-GOR. It's actually a very interesting character journey, and I like that she's actually given a fair amount to do in these stories. A lot of people kind of stereotype her as, oh, she's the damsel in distress, like, and yeah, she does get captured a lot, but there are a lot of scenes where Helene is actually the one who sort of figures things out and is able to sneak her way out of certain predicaments. So she's actually a much more nuanced character than a lot of people give credit for. And all of these KI-GOR stories kind of coalesce with my rediscovery of Jungle Stories and my heightened interest in them. Some of you might know that I did Jungle July the past few weeks. So I was just kind of getting, it was kind of the perfect storm for me personally to get interested in KI-GOR. So that's really how I discovered him. So some of you are probably saying, well, okay, that's fine and dandy. You want to read KI-GOR stories, but what really prompted this series? And what really prompted it was, I think it was about a year ago, before I really was doing the booktube thing here, and I saw somebody in some pulp group asking for like a KI-GOR companion book. For those that don't know, a companion book is basically a research book talking about the canonical events of a story, talking about what happens in the story, drawing it to events in the next story, things like that. I know The Shadow has had one. Actually, behind me, under my bed, I have a companion book for Solomon Kane that came out not too long ago. So it's a common thing in a lot of pulp and comic groups. And this individual was asking about it, and I at the time I decided to be a little cute and just leave a single comment that said "Stay tuned." And because I was actually kind of in the same boat of kind of wondering, oh, I wonder if someone could do a KI-GOR companion book. And the more I was reading KI-GOR, the more I went, maybe I should. So it's kind of been germinating in my head for a while. But one of the things if I want to do a KI-GOR companion book, I need to read KI-GOR. So I thought about it and said, well, I need to do research for it, and I need to read it. So I said, if I need to do reading for research, why not do a series showing that? Doing a review series where I review the books as I read them and research them. So I thought, okay, this could be both an excuse to review these stories, but also a good chance for research. And because the series ran for 56 stories, there's kind of an interesting thing of, well, if you do one story a week, that's a year and a month. And that is that is a pretty workable schedule, considering if the stories don't get overly elongated. Like if they do start getting into the 20, 30 chapters that like Burroughs was doing, okay, maybe it'll take a little longer. But the first couple stories I've seen don't go that long. So, yeah, I was also thinking about in terms, because where I'm at, school is starting for all the youngins, and I was kind of thinking, well, do a project that will take up a good chunk of the school year. That'll be a good pace setter. So I was like, okay, I wanted to do this just because I've been thinking about that companion book. I can pace things fairly well. It just seems like a decent enough idea. So, and the other thing that convinced me, I was a little hesitant for a while because, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of Steger reprints, but they're all for the early stories, and I was going, well, gee, are there enough reprints or access to some of those other stories that are later in the series? Because if I couldn't really access them easily, I was going to be like, that's not a viable strategy, especially because, for those that don't know, some stories are only easily accessible if you buy the original pulp magazines, and pulp magazines are not necessarily cheap, especially if you're buying collectible editions. So I was kind of hesitant by that. But as I did research, I discovered a lot of groups like Adventure House had a lot of KI-GOR reprints. Radio Archives had a lot of digital versions of the original Jungle Stories issues. And I found out that every story was easily available save for 3 of them. One of them was kind of an earlier story, and 2 of them were pretty much right at the end. So I went, okay, I think I can do that. If I might have to buy one of the original pulps for that one earlier story, but the rest of them should be fairly easy to get. So because I will be able to have access to them, I decided, okay, I have a good reason to start doing this since I have access to them. So yeah, I was like, okay, the stars are sort of aligned here. Might as well jump into gear and make this video and officially start it so that I'll get my rear into gear. So that is my plan for the next few months. This may not be a thing where there's one episode every week, because, like I said, I'm assuming that a lot of the stories are one-offs that are not terribly long. They're more like, a lot of people told me they're more like novellas than novels. But some of the later ones I've seen get a little thicker than the ones that are in this first volume, because this one has 6 stories. There's one collection, I think it's the most recent one, that has like 3 stories, and it's thicker than this one. So might get some phases where it's a little longer, but I'll generally be aiming for 1 KI-GOR review a week. I have a sneaking suspicion that's not going to pan out, but there will at least be 2 or 3 reviews a month, so that I can make decent progress on it. So I hope you guys enjoy the future KI-GOR stories I do, and I hope that this experience allows me to create a good companion book. And I'm sharing that I want to write a companion book because normally a lot of authors don't say what they're working on or say specifically until it's fairly ready, because a lot of people don't want their ideas swiped. But this is one where if somebody decides, oh, I'm going to make my own KI-GOR companion book, I'll be like, yeah, that's fine. I want to see it, so why not? So if you want to write yours, that's fine. But I'm gonna work on the assumption I'm one of the few die-hard KI-GOR fans that's willing to try and make this attempt. So that's how I'm going to approach this. So thank you very much to everybody watching. I hope that we have some good KI-GOR stories to read, and yeah, I hope this turns to be a fruitful and productive endeavor. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.